Alabama going into this season, many people counted this team out. You know me, I either was going to go with the Tide or Texas A&M to win the SEC, and I'm glad that I went with Alabama because Texas A&M was a disaster this season. And Nick Saban, this is the best coach in college football history and one of the best coaches in the history of sports. And with him on the sidelines for Bama going into the playoffs this season, you should feel really strongly about the Tide's chances to win it all this season. You know, with Nick Saban being the head coach of this team, going into their semifinal matchup against Michigan, they're going to be prepared, they're going to have a great game plan, and they're going to play to the best of their ability. You're not going to have a situation where this team doesn't show up. And I doubt that they're going to get blown out by any team that they face off against, especially if they have to play Texas in a rematch in the national championship. Do you know how hard it is to beat Nick Saban twice, especially in a neutral site game? Like, you beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, you get a lot of props from that. But it's really hard to beat Nick Saban 2 times in the same season. When you look at how talented this Alabama team is, they got one of the most talented teams in all of college football. They're like number 1 or number 2 in blue chip talent ratio. They got more 5 and 4 stars than pretty much anybody else in college football outside of Georgia and Ohio State. Nick Saban is going to have this team prepared. Now, when you look at Jalen Milroe, he's a big reason why Alabama's offense is going to be really tough to stop, because you look at his dynamic dual threat ability. The fact that he throws a really nice deep ball, he's really fantastic with the ball in his hands. Michigan hasn't seen a quarterback like this all season long. And Washington, you don't know if they're really going to be able to have the personnel to match up with the kind of athleticism that Jalen Milroe has as well. Texas, they had a really good game plan against Jalen Milroe when they beat them early in the season. But the Jalen Milroe that we see now is not the same quarterback that we saw when Alabama lost to Texas at home. He's gotten better every single week since that game happened. And Jalen Milroe, he may not be the most consistent passer, but he's good enough to get the job done. And when you couple that with the fact that you have to account for his running ability, which is out of this world, it opens up passing lanes because you're going to have to leave guys in as spies, which takes additional guys that you could have in coverage. Alabama's receiving core with Bond and Burton, they're good enough to have success against any other defense in the playoffs. Look, Michigan has a good defense, but these receivers are good enough to get open against that Michigan secondary. Okay, Texas secondary is the worst out of all the teams in the playoffs this year. Their secondary is the weakest link of their defense. Washington, their defense has played really well, but you do like the matchup between Alabama and with how physical they are up front compared to Washington. You look at Alabama's defense, though, right? This is the biggest reason why they can win it all this year. No team in college football has as talented as a defense as what Alabama has. I believe that this is the best defense in college football. Their defensive line is outstanding. They have multiple guys who can get after the quarterback. We already know about Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, who lead the team in sacks, but they got other defensive linemen who can get pressure on the quarterback. There are multiple guys who have several sacks on this pass rush. And you look at how good this defense also is against the run, going up against a team like Michigan that is run heavy. If you can slow down their run game and force them to become a pass-heavy team against this secondary, you feel really good about your chances to pull off that win. Michigan is not a team that's built to win throwing the football religiously. Like, they only have to throw the football 8 times to beat Penn State. And they played a pretty complimentary game against Ohio State. But like we saw last year when they were in the semifinals and they lost to TCU, when you can make them a one-dimensional offense and you put the weight of the game on J.J. McCarthy's shoulders, he's not that good enough to get it done. As a matter of fact, I think that J.J. McCarthy is massively overrated, and this Alabama defense is going to expose that. He holds on to the ball too long. He doesn't throw with anticipation. Alabama's defense, their secondary may give up a couple of big plays here and there due to miscommunication, but this is one of the most talented secondaries in all of college football. You got Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's going to be a first-round pick in next year's draft. You got Terrion Arnold, who has 5 interceptions, 11 pass breakups. There's so much talent and depth in this Alabama secondary. And with how good they are on the front seven, this is going to be a really tough outing for not just Michigan, but potentially any other team that they could face off in the postseason. You see, Nick Saban, coming into this year, the reason why people were low on him was because you had questions about quarterback and this coaching staff. But the biggest questions that we had about Alabama, what people thought were going to be weaknesses for this team, have now turned into strength. Kevin Steele, Tommy Rees have been fantastic coordinators for Nick Saban this year. Tommy Rees has been really good as the offensive coordinator for Alabama. And this defensive coordinator, Kevin Steele, this defense has been the best that it's been in the last couple of years under Nick Saban. And it's going to be hard to score more than at least 20 points on Alabama's defense. With the fact that they're good against the run, they got a good secondary, and they got a great pass rush, this is the most complete defense in the playoffs this year to me. Michigan's defense, they're good as well, but I do think that Alabama has a slight edge over them on the defense side of the football. You see, with how good Jalen Milroe has been the last couple of weeks, ever since he got benched against USF, he has been a completely different quarterback. And I don't think there's a big gap between him and J.J. McCarthy. I think they're on a level playing field. They both have their strengths and weaknesses. Jalen Milroe, the same thing that you said about J.J. McCarthy, asking him to win the game with his arm. You probably have that same concern with Jalen Milroe because he hasn't really been asked to throw the football no more than 20 plus times in the game. But with his athleticism and how much of a home threat he is anytime he decides to run with the football, I like Jalen Milroe in that matchup against J.J. McCarthy. He just has a different way that he can attack that Michigan defense that they haven't seen all season. And trying to game plan for this kind of athleticism is really difficult to stop, especially when you play the way that he did against Georgia in the SEC championship game when he was extending plays, buying time for guys to get open, making big throws with the pocket collapsing, getting outside and keeping the drive alive on third down. It's really frustrating as a defensive coordinator when you got to worry about a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. Because anytime things go wrong, he can still turn something in. He can turn nothing into something. So I'm looking at Alabama, and this team has a very great chance at being able to win the 2024 national championship. Like Washington, they're probably going to be my pick to win it all, but I don't know because I still like Alabama a lot. And I'm never going to count out the Nick Saban coach team. He has only lost one semifinal game in the history of the college football playoffs, and that was to Cardale Jones, Urban Meyer, and Ohio State in 2014. That's it. So you know that this Alabama team is going to be well prepared, and there's a reason why Michigan had that worried expression on their looks when they found out that they was going to be playing Alabama and not FSU. Some people say that Michigan was surprised, and okay, but there's a reason why they were surprised and had some shocked looks on their faces. Like when you know that you're playing against Alabama and you got to go up against Nick Saban, you know that it's going to be tough, and I'm pretty sure they would have been really confident about their chances of beating FSU. They definitely didn't want to see Alabama, and I don't think anybody wants to see Alabama. You see, Alabama is one of those teams that they don't really beat themselves. With how great this defense has played and the fact that they're complete on all levels, you know, it's going to be a big reason why they possibly could win it all this year. And Jalen Milroe and this offense, yeah, they may not impress you, but they're good enough to get it done also with his dual threat ability, his game-changing rushing ability, and the fact that they got a solid offensive line that struggled the first half of the season, but they definitely played well over the last couple of weeks. Some of the sacks that Jalen Milroe has taken has been because he's tried to do a little bit too much. But Alabama, they got everything that they need to win it all this year. Like, this is one of the most talented teams. This is the most talented team in the playoffs this year, just based on recruiting rankings and the overall level of talent that they have. So the talent's there. The coaching is there. The execution is going to be there as well. And it's going to be really hard to beat Alabama.